Accountability check before we get into the sell high options. 1, I'm 5-3 in my main redraft league. And 2, I'm currently advancing 36 of my Underdog Basketball Mania teams. I haven't seen someone advancing more. I'm sure you'll let me know if there is in the comment section. But anyway, the guys that we had as sell high candidates last week that if you didn't sell, you probably already missed the boat on, to be honest. Jordan Mason was a very clear sell high candidate at this point now. Jordan Mason has a shoulder injury. It really seems like McCaffrey's going to be coming back after the bye week. So you can still try to sell Jordan Mason. I'll just be very, very surprised if you're able to. George Pickens was a sell high candidate for us coming off the 100-yard game as a receiver with the receiving touchdown, 37 points for the Steelers. We are expecting that Russ was going to regress here a bit. Obviously, with Pickens in that primetime game, everybody was extremely excited, ranking him as a must-start wide receiver every week going into the future. I still view Pickens as that low-end wide receiver too. I would say now it's probably going to be a little bit tougher to sell Pickens. And honestly, the man almost blew up this past week if it wasn't for a call getting made that reversed the touchdown. And also, of course, him getting the same foot down twice rather than both feet down. I mean, Pickens could have had a blow-up game. Najee Harris was a sell-high candidate for us last week, again, with that same idea that you were going to see some regression with Russell Wilson and this offense overall. Plus, Jalen Warren was going to take usage as a receiver. I think it's going to be much harder to sell Najee now. I do want to reiterate, Najee's still a low-end RB2 for me. You can't start him. I would be a lot more excited about it in a non-PPR format. Tank Bigsby was a sell-high candidate for us in a full PPR league, knowing that 1, we are going to see some regression with this Jags offense. And 2, Bigsby's not a massive receiver that if you do get Etienne back into this offense, if Etienne does come in and only see 30% of the opportunities, it's going to be very difficult for Bigsby with a total of 3 receptions this season to do anything. And then our last sell-high candidate was Tony Pollard, with the understanding that this is one of the worst offenses in the league. And at the same time, Spears will be back in to turn this into a running back by committee. But now that the Titans just got blown out by 40 points, it's going to be very difficult to sell them. So recap, all these sell-high candidates from last week, you probably can't sell them anymore. Now going into our first sell-high candidate, I hate to say it because obviously he is an extremely talented player, but we are going to be looking at Tucker Kraft. Now, with Kraft, this is a tight end that has been phenomenal. I mean, if you go through and if you look at the past 5 games played, you've had 17 points, 24 points, 5 points, 12 points, 16 points. And now, this is a player that I think is the future tight end 1. I mean, he's the tight end 1 now for the Green Bay Packers, but he's going to continue to improve. He's only 23 years old. He's only in the 2nd season of his NFL career. We expect this to be one of the best offenses in the league. So Kraft will be an exciting tight end for years to come. But if we are looking at the projections going into the future this season, I do think that we should be a little bit hesitant to name Kraft as that borderline top 5 tight end rest of season. Now, technically is the tight end 5 right now from a total points perspective. But if we look at where these points are coming from, there are typically 3 different things to look at. 1, you're either going to get points from volume. 2, you're going to get points from efficiency. Or 3, you're going to get points from touchdowns. Now, with Kraft, we have seen him consistently go out there and break long breakaway plays as a tight end. It's incredible. We have seen him have an insane touchdown rate as well, but the volume hasn't really been there. And you know what's actually the stickiest predictor of future fantasy points going into the future is actually volume. Where if we go through and look at this, Tucker Kraft this season, you've seen 3, 2, 3, 9, 5, 4, 4, and 3 targets. The targets really have not been there. Now, of course, he's been breaking off the big plays. And if you look at the last 25 targets that this man has had, he's had 5 touchdowns. Yes, the man's right now looking at a 20% touchdown rate over the past 5 games or so. It's insane. It's unsustainable. It is going to be coming back down to earth. Instead of him being that top 5 tight end rest of season, I currently have him at tight end 11 in my rankings. I have him right behind guys like Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta, and Dalton Kincaid. I would prefer to pivot over to one of those options, especially now that you have the uncertainty at quarterback with Jordan Love banged up. Now, going over to our next player, I don't know if it's a sell high or sell low player here with Zay Flowers. Obviously, Deontay Johnson is coming over to Baltimore. We updated the rankings over on flockfantasy.com. I decided to move Zay Flowers down from being a low-end wide receiver 2 that you were starting pretty much every week, either at wide receiver in the flex and just accepting the volatility that came with it, to now being a wide receiver that's ranked, I want to say, as the wide receiver 32, right behind guys like Ladd McConkey, Josh Downs, Darnell Mooney. Because if we look at this Baltimore Ravens offense, Zay Flowers had already been a wildly inconsistent option in game environments in which you didn't have a ton of passing attempts for Lamar Jackson. You were looking at some games with 4, 2, and 1 target. In the game environments in which maybe the Ravens lose or it's a close game to the very end and Lamar has to throw the ball a ton, that's where you were getting the positive performances. You were getting 10, 11, 12, 9, 12 targets. But going into the future, do we expect that Flowers can hit these double-digit target marks with Deontay Johnson in this same offense? For me, I personally wouldn't. Now, of course, I'm always going to bet on the young, ascending round 1 wide receiver that has shown that he has plenty of talent over the, I don't want to say washed up veteran, but over the journeyman veteran that's going from team to team to team. I am ranking Zay Flowers well ahead of Deontay Johnson rest of season. But going through rest of season, I view this as a rush first offense where Zay Flowers is going to be competing for targets with the tight ends and now with Deontay Johnson. So I don't know if you're ever really excited to start Flowers. Like, I think I would prefer Mooney over him. Now, going over to our next player, we are looking at a New York running back. Now, no, this is not Breece Hall. I will say my favorite underdog pick for this Thursday night's game is Breece Hall to score a touchdown. Right now, you're actually getting a multiplier with that pick of 1.06. And on top of that, you have vulture protection where Braylon Allen vultures him at the goal line. You're actually getting a refund on that pick'em. And if you are new to Underdog, you're actually going to get an additional CJ Stroud free pick, more than less than half a total yard for that Thursday night game. You'll get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. And on top of that, you're going to be getting a free team review in the live stream that we're doing every single night. Just go through the link in the description or comment section and use code FLOCK. But this is instead Tyrone Tracy. If you are looking at Tracy here, I want to be on record. He has been phenomenal. Over the past month, you've seen 14 points, 22 points, then 6 points, but then 23 points against a Pittsburgh Steelers defense that arguably is the or one of the best defenses in the league. You're looking at Tracy, and he's doing this with volume as well. You're looking at Tracy coming out and seeing 18 carries, 17 carries, 20 carries. I just have one hesitation with Tracy here. It's one, of course, the concussion. And two, how bad this Giants offense truly is. If you look at this Giants team going into the future, this is a team that is no longer playing for anything. This is a team that's kind of shutting down the season, hoping that they were able to get a quarterback in the offseason. They have no reason to rush back Tracy. What we saw from Malik Neighbors is Malik Neighbors went into concussion protocol for a Thursday night game. He had 10 days to recover to the following Sunday game. He sat. Then another 7 days to recover. He sat that one out as well. Here, Tracy sees this concussion on a Monday night. You're 2 weeks away from the bye. So you have a 6-day turnaround for Tracy going into this Washington performance, where I'd imagine he has a very, very slim shot to play. And then the following week, if you're the Giants, are you going to be rushing Tracy back in, or are you just going to give him that week and then the following bye week to recover? So in my mind, I think it's a very real possibility that Tracy misses the next 13 or so days with this concussion. They roll him into the bye week, and you don't have Tracy coming back until week 12. When he does come back week 12, he's going to be stepping back into one of the worst offenses in the league. Tracy's definitely been used as a receiver. He hasn't been a phenomenal receiving option so far this season. I'm just a little bit afraid that the touchdown ceiling is going to be capped and you're not going to have the games played, which is why if you look at him in my rankings, I have him as a low-end RB2 rest of season rather than that mid to high-end RB2. I have him behind somebody like Chase Brown, where I think Chase Brown may not see the same amount of opportunities, but Brown is fully healthy and in a much better offense as well. I also have Tracy behind guys like Tony Pollard and Javonte Williams. Guys that I'm pretty confident are going to see one, more games played than Tracy. Like Pollard, you're going to get the extra 2 to 3 games played. And at the same time, we've seen over a large sample now that Pollard and Javonte are going to have a very large role as a receiver, particularly in a full PPR format. So Tracy was great on Monday night. Everybody saw this game unless you're watching the World Series. But going into the future, I'm maybe just a little bit concerned that this is a bad offense and he could be missing the next 3 weeks. And if you can find someone to value him as that locked and loaded RB starter every single week, I think I would look to pivot. Now let's move over to a couple receivers. I'm going to be looking at both the combo of Keon Coleman and Kahlil Shakir. Now both receivers were phenomenal this past week. And if y'all remember way back at the beginning of the season, we had Keon Coleman as a buy low option. I mean, I drafted Keon Coleman with a ridiculous amount of my underdog teams. This is a player that I really hope keeps scoring touchdowns. But a couple different things with Keon in particular is one, the touchdown rate maybe looks a little bit unsustainable. Two, the reason I was drafting him so much is I thought he had a realistic path to be the wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen. Where now with Amari Cooper coming into Buffalo, I understand Amari only plays 50% of the snaps this past week in comparison to Keon Coleman up at 83%. I would still expect that Amari actually expands his role in this offense going into the future where maybe Keon can, but the thing is Keon has had 2 games this season with more than 5 targets. So if you had 2 games this year with more than 5 targets and we're expecting Amari to expand his role, realistically speaking, I don't see how Keon Coleman is an every week locked and loaded starter. And we can say the same thing with Kahlil Shakir, where Shakir has had 1 game with more than 7 targets in this offense. If we're expecting Amari to expand his role, I don't see how he is an every week starter. Now, of course, if you're playing in a league that's like the Flock League, right, where it's a 12-team format, you have multiple flex spots. So a wide receiver depth piece like this, that's maybe a high-end wide receiver 3, that's somebody that you're starting every single week. That's a format where I'd want to hold on to Keon Coleman. I'd want to hold on to Kahlil Shakir. Whereas if you're playing in that 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, realistically speaking, I don't see how you start him. I would love to package him in a 2-for-1 deal to go get an upgrade elsewhere. Right now, we have Keon and Shakir wide receiver 39 and wide receiver 40 in our rest of season ranks, directly behind guys like Xavier Worthy, Michael Pittman Jr., and Calvin Ridley. Now, Rashad White will be our next sell high candidate here. And with White, I'll be honest, I think we ranked him too high initially with the rest of season rankings that we put out on the channel way back on Monday. Obviously, I continue to dive into things throughout the week. I continue to go through and tinker with the rest of season rankings on the site. And Rashad White's a running back that I've had to move down because if you just look on the surface, well, yeah, over the past 2 weeks, Rashad White's giving you 29 points and 16 points. He's out here averaging 15 points per game. Realistically speaking, this has come off of 3 touchdowns, whereas in the first 6 weeks of the season, you had a total of 0. Now, obviously, I don't expect White to go back to averaging 0 touchdowns through 6 games played, but I do think that you probably have a happy medium, and more so, the important thing to look at is the underlying involvement of Bucky Irving. While Sean Tucker has not been an impact player in this offense, Bucky Irving has actually had a very similar profile to Rashad White in terms of the usage of these running backs. Even Bucky is getting that same involvement as a receiver now, with Bucky seeing 6-7 targets this past week. So I'm worried that if the opportunity split here 50-50, plus the fact that this is a much worse offense than it was at the beginning of the season, if you're looking at sportsbooks right now, while yes, in a tough matchup this week against the Chiefs, nonetheless, they are currently projecting the Bucs to be a bottom 5 offense in points scored this week. I think that is something that scares me off of them potentially. Now, going over to our next option, we're going to be looking at Raheem Mostert. Obviously, Mostert scores 2 rushing touchdowns. You get the 16 fantasy points. Realistically speaking, though, even in a game where Mostert scored 2 touchdowns, did it help anybody? No, you didn't start the dude. Are you going to go through and start him this next week against Buffalo? No. While I expect that Mostert potentially has a goal line role going into the future, which could definitely impact Devon Achane and make Achane a low-end RB1 rather than an elite RB1, if Mostert just has the goal line role and Achane has everything as a receiver, where Mostert is currently a 32-year-old back that really hasn't shown much juice, I think if someone sees the touchdowns for Mostert and thinks that he can be a viable RB, I would look to pivot off of him. I have him behind guys like Rico Dowdle, Alexander Madison, and Zach Moss. I think there's a very realistic shot that you could pivot from Mostert to Dowdle at this point if the Dowdle owner is worried, obviously, about the additional running backs that have come in Dallas. But I really hope I was able to help you out with this video. Of course, if you wanted to tell us on that underdog pick on Thursday night, we are going with Breece Hall to score a touchdown in a game which they are favored. You're getting the 1.06x multiplier on that. Plus, you're getting the vulture protection. So if Braylon Allen steals the touchdown, then Breece actually gets you that refund. But of course, you can find that link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. Code FLOCK will hook you up with a free CJ Stroud pick, more than less than half total yard. Plus, you're going to be getting hooked up with a free team review on flockfantasy.com. Just make sure that you set up an account on flockfantasy.com with the same email address as your Underdog account. And lastly, you'll be getting a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000 as well on Underdog with code FLOCK. But I really appreciate you, and I really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.